Hey, HighLevel fans, welcome to another training on workflows. In this training, we're going to go a little bit deeper than just an overview like we did in the last session. We're going to talk a little bit more about how to create a workflow. If you're brand new to HighLevel and you've never created a workflow, we're going to talk about how to create a workflow, how to organize them in folders, and as well as how to create a simple workflow to begin with. All right, let's go right into it. So first off, we've got create folders and create workflows here. If you don't have anything, if in this case, this is all empty right now, all what you're seeing is folders and how they're named in here, when they were last updated and when they were initially created, so on and so forth. When you go into a particular workflow, you'll also see some data here related to how many people or how many contacts are enrolled in that in total and how many of them are active. The active and total number differs because people can opt out or be removed from a workflow at different stages or different things that may be set up. So active shows you how many are in there currently that have not finished the workflow. All right, so let's go ahead and start learn how to create a workflow. First, you'll go to create workflow, and then you've got several different options over here that you can pick from. There's a bunch of recipes that HighLevel themselves have created right in here that you could utilize. To use a recipe, simply select it and then hit create new workflow again. Otherwise, hit start from scratch. You can also import from a campaign as well. If you've got previously, if someone had built some stuff on campaigns, you can select one of the campaigns and import whatever sequence is there from that. We're not going to do that. We're going to start from scratch. So let's go ahead and click that. And then it does require you to click this green button, create new workflow, again, once you have selected which type you're going to use to start creating. So once it does that, it goes and creates a brand new workflow for you from scratch that requires you to name it, set up the settings, and add a trigger, then add actions. So one of the things you always want to do is remember to name what this workflow will be, right? So be sure to give it a name. It's going to type it in, and then let's go ahead and go over to settings. There's a few settings over here that are very, very crucial, and it is completely dependent on how you want the workflow to perform. If you would like, well, let's go ahead and go over it in detail right here. So the time window refers to you want this workflow to be able to send out at any time, where specific time refers to that if you have enabled it now, this workflow will only work on these days that are in blue, but will not work on these days that are in gray, the ones that are not highlighted. And it will only work, meaning actions inside that workflow will only take place when it's between these times, right? So someone can still be triggered and enter into a workflow, but the very first action in there will not take place until the condition here has been met, which is it must be either a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, or between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. You can obviously change this to whatever times you would like to change here. You can select different days and allow turn on and off different days as you wish to. And then we've got sender's address and email. So this is if there are any messages that are emails that are going out to your leads or customers or contacts, you want to define by default what that from name of that email is going to be and what that from email address is going to be. We like to use a custom value here. So we have a custom value called business short name. So you can go ahead and enter that in here. You can also sort of do this where you can enter a slash, and then you can do a contact user dot first underscore name. something like that. I forget what the exact custom value is, but you can put in the for example the first name here and then the company name at the end, however you like to do that. That way you can show to them that, hey, this is, Beant with Extendly, or Sean with Go High Level, or Chase with Go High Level, whatever the case may be. So they know who, in case they don't know who Chase is and which company he's from, they'll know Chase with Go High Level. Or in case they don't know who Beant is and which company he's from, they'll know Beant slash Extendly, right? So they'll know, and they may recognize sometimes the person's name, sometimes they may recognize the company name, and so this sort of becomes as you attempt to help them recognize either or. And then email address could be, again, we like to use a custom value here as well, but you can type in anything you wish. We have a from email as a custom value put in place, and the custom value really helps you. Well, by the way, in case you need to modify the email address, you could also do that inside the workflows, and we'll go over that as well. But the custom values really help you put in a value there that you would have already put inside your custom values section, without always having to remember, hey, what the heck, what was that email that I'm going to put over here every single time. That way, all you do is select in this custom value, it populates in automatically. All right, the next ones are important pieces in relation to how the workflow should function. So allow multiple. Allow multiple is extremely important. Most of the time you want to have it off. There's very particular reasons why you do not want to have it on. Allow multiple means, can a contact enter the same exact workflow more than once? Right? The way it's set up right now, it is turned off, and right now it is turned on. Turned on means yes, the contact can enter the same workflow multiple times. Turning it off means no, the contact cannot enter the workflow more than one time. So they can enter it in, it can trigger a workflow once, and they'll never be able to enter into that workflow again, ever, unless there's a different contact created for them with different email or phone number. Then they can, but otherwise they'll never be able to. So this is, you want to use the allow multiple to be turned off in those scenarios where you only want to send that type of a message to that contact only once, ever. Right? So wherever it's that type of a situation where you only want to send something or trigger something or have an action take place only once, then you want to have it turned off, right? But if you want them to be able to enter into that workflow multiple times for different reasons, then you do want to have it on. So for example, a good example in having it on to allow multiple is a calendar, and when an appointment is scheduled, or a workflow where there's a missed call, or a workflow where there's a website chat widget. Someone triggers a website chat widget and they want to be able to message you in. So those are all examples of where you do want to allow them to enter into that workflow more than once, right? But by the way, that means, just to clarify, allowing them more than once doesn't mean that they can enter the same workflow and be in there 2 times at the same time. I mean, it means that at different times, when one time, at one particular time, that contact has finished the workflow, now for a second round, they could, if it triggers again, they can enter in again. Simultaneously, though, they can only be there in one time. There is an exception to this rule. The exception is if it's in a workflow that is triggered for a calendar and appointment schedule trigger, then that person can enter that workflow more than once simultaneously. Now, if it is a workflow where you have said you've used the action type as send to workflow or go to workflow, I forget what the exact terminology there is, then they can also be inside that workflow simultaneously more than one time. So those are the two exceptions. Otherwise, you are only allowed to enter the workflow once at a time. Yeah, so that's to clarify the allow multiple there. Stop on response. Just as obvious it is, if they reply to any of your messages, and that is a text message or an email, if there's a response to those, and if this is turned on, then it will stop the workflow. It will not do any of the other actions that are on that may be after that point, and it'll just go all the way to the bottom, and it'll end the workflow. So turning it off, meaning even if they communicate with you after, the workflow will still continue to go on. Turning it on means if they do respond to one of your messages, they will be exited from that workflow. A good example here to turn it on is, let's say if it's a canceled meeting or a no-show meeting or appointment workflow, and you're triggering out messages saying, hey, looks like I haven't heard from you. Would you like to reschedule your meeting? And they text you back and saying, no, thank you. I don't want to reschedule. I need some more time, or yada, 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 whatever the case is, right? Then you don't, at that time, you want to stop that workflow. You don't want the future follow-up messages to trigger out, so that they're not, it doesn't look stupid where you're still asking for, hey, I haven't heard from you. Did you still want to get together? Instead, it just doesn't send them any more messages. Otherwise they would be like, well, I just told you that I'm not ready to schedule. Why are you asking me again, right? So that's to prevent any of those type of things happening. So there's very good reasons why you want to use stop on response. Most of the time, it'll be turned off. Depending on the workflow that you're using, you'll definitely would want to have it on. Now, conversation management. This is an important one, and I love it because it auto marks any of the outbound messages as read when this workflow triggers. But it has to be used very carefully, though. The reason being, so if you've got I like to have it turned on in most of our workflows, where any sort of outbound messages we're sending out, we don't want it to populate in our conversations inbox with the message that we sent out automatically, and for it to show up in the unread section, so that way, we don't have to go there and have a look at it and then have to manually mark them as read. We only want to know when a customer or a lead or a contact messages in. We only want those ones in the unread side of the things. Now, the reason why you have to use it carefully or be careful with it, is because sometimes you can have, for example, an email trigger out, right? And it triggers out. Then let's say 1 hour later, you have another message triggering out, and you have this auto mark as read turned on. So when the email goes out, now if someone responds back to you within that 1 hour, let's say they respond to you 20 minutes later, right? You'll receive that response, and it'll be there for 40 minutes under the unread section, because after that, from the original stage, 1 minute, 1 hour later, we have this other action scheduled to go out as a text message, which will get auto marked as read as well, and that email will now get missed. So unless you looked at it right then and there within that 40-minute gap, you are able to now review what that person had said. But otherwise, it will trigger to the next action, and it'll send a message out, and HighLevel will automatically mark that message as read as well. It'll archive your conversation, and then it'll be under the all section at that time, and it won't be under the unread section. So that's one part. You have to be a bit careful about how to use the auto mark as read here. Otherwise, if this doesn't suit you, you can definitely use the edit conversation action, which also allows you to mark it as read as well. There's a couple of options there, and we'll go over the actions in another video to cover all of the actions individually. All right, so that's for that, and you can definitely leave it turned off. If you leave it turned off, that means any automated messages that go out will not be marked as read, and you'll have a bunch of unread messages, which will then you would want to mark them as read anyways. And regardless, you're not going to see any incoming messages from your customers in that scenario either, because if the same thing happened where the email is scheduled to go out and goes out and the customer responds, and then 40 minutes later the text message is scheduled to go out and goes out as well, now what you're going to see in your unread section is a text message that went out as the last message, but you're not going to see the customers respond to that email unless you clicked on to that conversation, viewed that conversation, and noticed that there is actually a reply to that last email that you had sent out. That's one thing to sort of be careful about there. But other than that, I always like to have it on, as it helps keep the conversation tab very organized and clear. All right, so that's everything. Then there is an event start date. HighLevel have deprecated this. They're no longer using this because they've an event start date as an action item inside the workflows. The event start date was originally designed to only start that workflow when it meets the date and time criteria that is listed here. So think about it for like a webinar or something. That's what it was, but they've done a better job and moved it into an action where you can use it as an action, so you can sort of trigger out, for example, if you did have a webinar, right, when someone registers for it, you can trigger out a confirmation to the registration, leading up to it, reminders, and so on and so forth. And then when the event date is, when the webinar is scheduled for, you can trigger out a message, and then after the event date, you can now trigger out additional message like a recap, replay video, or something like that, right? 1 hour after the event start date, type of thing. So that's how that would be used. All right, so that is a complete overview of the default settings that are available here. Now let's go and go over to history. In history, there's probably no data here yet, but here you can see what happened, what triggered actions, and things of that nature. Status also sort of tells you the same thing, but live for the people that are in there right now. And you can also go back and search different dates, times, action types, and different types of statuses that you may want to look at. Which workflow action was executed, which was failed, which one was finished, or I only want to see the stuff that finished, things like that. You can see those there. You can also select contacts or search by contacts, all right here. All right, so let's go ahead and go over to action. So in the last video, we covered how to add a trigger, and that there are a bunch of actions, right? So these are all the actions here that are available. And right now, we're going to create a simple workflow. And let's create a workflow here related to call status. Okay, and well, now that we're doing call status, we'll go ahead and utilize the auto mark as read feature, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. So, okay, so let's do call status, add a filter, call direction, let's select outgoing, and the call status is, let's just say it's completed. All right, so call status, outgoing call is. All right, so a little tip right here, you always want to name your triggers and describe them to exactly what they are, so that just by looking at it, so this defines exactly what this trigger is, and I don't have to ever click into it to find out what that trigger is when I'm later visiting this workflow. And then you can obviously add multiple triggers here. You can add another trigger to this as well if you wanted to trigger this workflow. When you have multiple triggers, it basically says that, hey, let's say we had trigger number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if either one of those conditions inside those trigger numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 are met, then that contact will enter that workflow. It doesn't need to meet all of them, it just needs to meet one of them. So whichever one is met first, it'll enter in. And while that contact is active and inside that workflow, it's not going to enter into that workflow again. But if that workflow finishes, then another trigger is met, then it will enter into that workflow again, so long the allow multiple is turned on. If allow multiple is not turned on, then it will not enter in that workflow. All right, so the first thing I like to do is add a note. And this is, we like to call it a system added note, just to say what workflow triggered. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that into here. And we want to name it, workflow number, let's just say XYZ for now. And you want to sort of describe what is happening in this workflow. Going call is being marked as completed, and as red is outgoing call, actually, when outgoing call is completed, mark conversation as red. A call to contact name was placed on, so let's say right now, placed at by user first name. All right, so what this is going to do is it's going to log that this is the workflow that triggered, and now we've also sort of created an automatic note in here that says, hey, a log in here that says, hey, a call to this contact name was placed at this time by this user. Right, so since this is an outgoing call, now we know if someone called out, who that person was and what time they called out, right? Just by looking at their notes. Now, of course, you do know that through the call conversation as well, in the conversations tab, but this is just an additional logging mechanism, just for the purpose of this demonstration here. So now I can go ahead and add in edit conversation, and let's say I want to move to recent tab, and I want to mark it as red. Edit conversation, mark. All right, sounds good. In addition, if I wanted to, I can also send out, let's say, an internal notification. I could send out an SMS. And the SMS could go to the assigned user, no template, and this could be like, hey, enter in your notes for this conversation. And then we can also send out an SMS to the customer as well and say, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. It was a pleasure speaking to you. I look forward to working together. And then, of course, you can have, username and whatnot on there. So, not that you would want to send this type of message out every single time, but this is just an example. All right. Sounds good. So there you go. There you have it. That's one workflow that you've created. And now what it would do is every time there's an outgoing call, it's going to enter into this workflow. It's going to add that systematic note. It's going to mark that conversation as read. And then it is going to send out that thank you message to the customer. Now, the reason I've added this edit the conversation marked as read is because if there's an incoming or an outgoing call, it doesn't automatically get marked as read. For some reason, it doesn't is not defined by the auto mark as read here, because actually for some reason, for a good reason, because it is a trigger. It is not an action inside here. Now notice only the actions inside here are the ones that are going to get marked as read. So now we're saying, hey, let's edit this exact conversation and mark it as read, which includes this outgoing call coming in, because this is a later step. This happens first, then this workflow triggers out, then this happens, and that is when it's going to mark it as read right there. Okay. Now, if we wanted to add like a wait time or something like that of a minute, we can, for whatever reason we wanted to, we can definitely do that. So now we've added wait 1 minute. We've added a 1 minute wait. So now this SMS is going to wait 1 minute. So after we hang up, then it's going to wait 1 minute, then send out that message. So it looks like it's an actual person who's sending it out, not some sort of automation that as soon as we hang up and I got this text message, right? Because that might feel a little weird, but it takes someone a few seconds to type up that message. So they typed it up, sent it after a minute, and the person will probably send you back a thank you message or something like that. Yeah, it was great. Look forward to talking to you again, or whatever the case is. All right. So now once you are done building out your workflow, you definitely want to mark it as published. One more thing. So now, since this is an outgoing call and there is a message involved in here that is going out, if there wasn't a message in here, no problem. But since there is an outgoing message here, you don't want the same message to be received by that person over and over again, unless it was some sort of a generic message that goes out just because you've had a conversation. So you would want to enter in a wait time here. This is a little tip that I want to share with you guys. So in something like this, maybe 24 hours. Right? So if I'm going to have multiple calls with this person, or, let's say I called them back an hour later, 2 hours later again, whatever the case is, I don't want that same message going out every single time, because then that kind of becomes annoying. So now it's going to wait 24 hours in this workflow. It's not going to let that person enter into this workflow again because there's this message. And then after that, they'll be able to enter into this workflow and receive that first time thank you message. Right. And another good reason here would be to use have allow multiple turned off, just like what we have here. So if allow multiple is turned off, then we don't need the this wait 24 hours action. Then we can simply just have it here. And this could be, this message could then be geared as the first time when we talk to a person. This is sort of the message I want to send out. Right. So that way, every time this is the first time that I'm talking to this person, this message goes out, and we're thanking them. Now it makes sense. But now we're going to ensure that this workflow only triggers one time, which is the very first time we talk to this person, right? So let's say outgoing call workflow, and then we can also add in here another trigger, which could be, let's say, a call status, and call direction is incoming, and call status is completed. All right, so now it'll enter in this workflow when either one of these actions trigger. So whether it's an incoming call or an outgoing call, either of those call is completed, it's going to enter into this workflow. It's going to do all of these things, and it's going to send out that text message. And we're only allowing it to enter into this workflow once. So now this makes perfect sense. Hey, first time we talk to this person, we want to send them a thank you message after we talk to them, right? A thank you message that sends out. Maybe you don't want to say, I look forward to working with you because maybe, you talked on the call and it wasn't, a good fit or whatever, right? So just some general thank you message to thank them for the time. All right, there you go. So now that's a live workflow. We have published it right here as well. And now we're able to use this as is. You definitely want to go back and turn on, make sure the settings are correct as well, right? But we definitely want to turn on any time in here. There's no email going out, so I'm not worried about this. But if there was, then I could set that up as well. I want to make sure the allow multiple is off, stop and response is off, and or it doesn't matter in this workflow because I only have one message going out, not a series of them. And then auto mark as read is on. So now this workflow is ready to fire off and ready to go. All right, so there you go. So now that is how you build workflows. That's just one simple workflow we built. There's thousands of them you can build in many different variations. Wishing you the best with and building workflows, and hope to show you more on how we build workflows in my next video and go over more of the workflow sequences in detail. Thanks for staying tuned and watching this. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube channel and also join our Facebook group, getextendly.com/Facebook. That's getextendly.com/Facebook. Thank you.